This is Don't Punch the DM, Adventures in Gaming Therapy. Does that sound more like a minority? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, I guess I'll just start with introductions. I'm Zach. I have nothing to do with anything. I just got to the podium first.
Hi, Zach.
I'm Johnny Spangler. I've been working with adolescents for over a decade and been completely addicted to gaming, specifically Minecraft, for, I don't want to say it. I run a YouTube channel called Johnny Knowing, and I make YouTube videos using Minecraft to teach social skills to kids who like to watch it.
I'm Adam Johns. I'm a marriage and family therapist, therapy associate, those who are keeping track, in the Kirkland area. And I also started a company called Wheelhouse Workshop, which teaches teens social skills using games like Dungeons & Dragons. I started that company with this guy.
My name is also Adam. I'm Adam Davis. I have done a lot of drama therapy work. I'm a freelance drama therapist. I've worked in and around the schools. I also wrote a chapter in this book. The publisher wanted me to bring it, The Walking Dead Psychology, so check it out. And we founded Wheelhouse Workshop together about 2 years ago, working with specifically social skills, working with teens and adolescents, 13 to 19 mostly, helping them have some social confidence, building some positive social rapport with other kids who have similar challenges.
Using Dungeons & Dragons. that's the important part. That's the part that you guys kind of can't.
There's a lot of therapy in Candyland. All right, so let's start this off. I want people to randomly yell out until I yell at you to stop. Some of the worst things you've been told when you tell people that you play role-playing games.
Nerd.
Devil worshiper.
Devil worshiper.
Antisocial.
Antisocial. Awesome. Good job.
Cultist. Virgin.
Mom's basement, right? Yeah. Don't you have friends? I heard that one. Okay, great. I'm yelling at you to stop now. That's another bad thing you can. No. Okay, so it turns out that all of those people were wrong, which I'm sure you're happy and surprised to hear, right? But the question is, sure, I can tell you that, but what does that really mean? Why are they wrong? How does D&D actually help us grow and expand our friends group, grow as a person, so on and so forth?
So I'll leave kind of some of the answering, especially like the video game stuff, to Johnny. But I'll answer at least as far as Dungeons & Dragons goes. Our model and the idea that kind of spawned all of this and that's really stemmed from this is these games are inherently social. As you guys, I'm sure, are totally aware, these games are social games. It requires you to sit down and play along with other people. So the biggest fundamental piece of this is that it's social and it's fun. You're going to sit down and you're going to have a fun time doing something social. Obviously, it's a pro-social game, right? You're not sitting in your basement alone. You're not doing things alone. You're doing things with other people. So that idea is the biggest, most fundamental piece of this. And you guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, with all of this. But there are a couple of other concepts that go right along with that might ring a bell and might resonate with you a little bit. The first is that your character is you. Every decision that you make, everything that you put into your character, every time you make a character name, every time you choose a class, you're choosing one thing over another thing, and every decision that you make is some piece of you that you're putting into that character. You're allowing that character to be a part of you. And that means that you are your character is you, at least in some small way. No matter how much you may be picking a character that looks exactly like Gandalf the Grey, as I'm sure many of you have. But you picked Gandalf the Grey over Gandalf the White, or you picked Gandalf the Grey over Dumbledore. You made a decision for one thing over another thing. And because of that, your character is a representation of you in one way or another. And the last piece is this idea that imagined reality is, at least as far as building social skills and having experiences, especially fun experiences, is equal to and just as important as actual reality. If I have an experience in the game, that is just as salient an experience as an actual thing that I have experienced in real life. So since my character has experienced something in a game, and we know that it's just as important as the actual reality of experiencing something, and I am my character, and the whole experience itself is social and positive. We know that the experience, that this type of thing, playing these games, is a positive experience. We know that it's good for us. I lost my train of thought.
You're supposed to put your hand over there as a consultation.
To build on what Adam just said, the idea that your character is you, we see a number of different ways that plays out in the context of playing a role-playing game with, in our case, teens. We see some people that are running to practice a certain behavior, and so they'll choose a kind of character that is good at something that they don't feel confident playing with. Or they have a fantasy about trying something out that they don't have the option to in real life. My personal background as a gamer through electronics, role-playing games entirely since I was a small child. I always chose like a ninja or some sort of dexterous character. I was an overweight kid who got bullied a lot for my size, and so I often chose characters that took up a very little amount of space and who could disappear whenever they wanted to, because I always felt like I was noticed everywhere I went. And so, I'm seeing some nodding heads in the audience too. I always chose characters that could disappear when they wanted to, that weren't noticed by everybody. I chose snipers in all the video games I played. So I encourage you guys to think back on the characters you played in your role-playing games or even in your video games when you can choose a class. Why you choose those things. Is it something that is a reflection of your real life? And I'll bet it is.
Yeah, all characters that you design are autobiographical in some aspect. Whether it be what you wish you could be in art, or whether it be exactly who you are, there's some reaction between you and why you make the choices that you do. And this is actually in direct comparison to a lot of structured games, right? In these games, you get the choice to make your character to have your character be who you want them to be. This is versus a bunch of games where there's an origin story already in place and you're following through. You get to do fun things and they're awesome games, but there's a pre-written story set up for you to follow. So in those, obviously, you're very limited in the choices you can make. Those customizations are still indicative, but these types of games, obviously, are much closer to an expression of you.
And every choice you make, either in the character creation process or as you play your character, are all reflections of you, because you're the one making those choices. Whether it's from a set list of things to choose from or an open sandbox world, any of those things are still reflections of something going on in the background. Whether or not you love Frodo, you want to play like Frodo, there's a reason why Frodo is meaningful to you. And those are interesting things for you to think about and reflect on.
So we have all therapy nerds, psychology nerds, and gaming nerds. And the thing that is really, I know for myself, and I believe I speak for all of us, that has drawn us to this work is that it's in gaming, there is expression of truth. You pick something that really speaks to yourself. I'm a huge Minecraft person. I just love it, and it's because I can make things that other people can explore that are an expression of myself. So I can say, look at this, I built it, and now come on inside and be impressed. Like, see me. Please give me something so that I know that you at least understand another piece of me. And we have found that games are amazing at letting, in our case, adolescents, but I'm sure all of you have had this, let somebody see a piece of you that isn't normally apparent. You can really get into it. And so the work that we've been doing and the stuff we've been developing is, how do you do that in a systematic way? How do you do this in a very therapeutic, very kind of evidence-based and experience-based way of helping adolescents and people pull out these sides and see these sides of themselves using games.
Right, intentional gaming, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a good question. Okay, so has anyone in the room not ever played D&D? Awesome.
That may be the best thing that I see all year. Makes me so happy.
You don't know. You can cry on stage.
I might come to.
Okay. Has anyone here not played Mindcraft? Okay, a few more. We'll get you. Don't worry.
You will be assimilated.
So as most / all of you have experienced, these are games that you've played probably for at least one session and probably more likely years and years of stories, of experiences. You're playing a game. It's an incredible experience. You've got this history behind you of all of these things that have happened. These three up here do it intentionally. They intentionally guide those experiences. But my question is, what does that mean? Why? How is what you do any different than what's done at home around the dinner table, or in our awesome gaming basement, which I really wish I had.
So the question, if I heard it right, was, how is this different from just playing with my friends?
Yes.
How is it what we do different from just playing with my friends? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. There is the growth that can happen spontaneously out of play all the time. And when you can kind of understand the direction that growth usually goes, and you can facilitate it and be a catalyst for it. So an example of this is, for those of you, you'll hear me talk about Minecraft a lot. It's where my experience is, but forgive me if you have ideas about it. But I run a server for youth that have social disabilities. And so they come on this, and so we do group builds, and we have griefing and people blowing up each other's stuff, and then we're working that out. And while that happens naturally on servers, usually it ends up in fights. Because of the work that I've done with these kids individually, we can start pulling out these little pieces of themselves. So a great example of this, all of these kids on the server I work with outside of the game as well. But there's one student in particular. He never turned in his homework because he was afraid of it not being perfect. So if the homework wasn't perfect, he didn't want to turn it in, and he was always afraid it wasn't perfect. So he's this.
That's why I didn't turn in my homework.
Exactly. That's why I didn't turn in my homework. It wasn't perfect. And so we were working on this, and what we ended up doing was logging into the server and building a castle. And I said, I want you to make this castle imperfect, because he would freeze up when I said build a castle. I said, you have to make it imperfect. So he made it imperfect. And then together, along with some of the other kids, we covered it in TNT and we blew it up. And that gave us a shared language between he and I. When he talked about not wanting to do the homework, I'm like, is this because it's an imperfect castle? And he goes, yes. And I said, so why don't you just turn it in and then we can blow it up? And so that's kind of an example of me seeing something in him that no one else really got, and then helping him work through it using a game that he absolutely loved. Absolutely loved this game. And so that helped him kind of extrapolate it out into his real life.
Public service announcement, don't actually blow up homework. We're not responsible for your actions. I hope that's on video somewhere.
Or castles, actually.
Yeah.
That's a positive. That piece, the intentional piece, is the biggest part of what we do, just as far as being really intentional for what is it that we're trying to work on. So setting up those opportunities to have specific skills that we're working on, or specific things that we're trying to address, or specific situations that we're trying to do, are the perfect times to be able to express that out through the game. And it gives you the opportunity to have some distance from it. It gives you the opportunity to approach things that would be really challenging for you without having to actually be in that situation. And it gives us, as the controllers of that game, the opportunity to give success. We know we can give them success just by seeing them try at it. So a good example that we often use is just a general kid who's shy, who's really having a hard time speaking up. We sometimes get kids in our groups that don't say anything at all. Like getting them to say anything is a huge success for them. So we might only have to give a speech to an entire army to rally them against the invading army that is coming to them. And for this kid, right, he's sitting at a table, he's playing Dungeons and Dragons, but he's imagining himself as the dwarf character that he is, standing in front of this army of people and having to give some type of rallying speech for them. And when he goes, "Come on guys, you can do it," I get the opportunity as the dungeon master to go, "They erupt and cheer and they love it and they're hugely motivated for it." Because for him, just that was huge. That was huge. That was a giant leap for him forward.
It's the most words he said in multiple sessions,
Yeah.
all in a row.
And for him to be successful at that, for him to see the success in that, that's a rewarding experience. That's the experience that he's going to go home with, and that he's going to remember that time that he was able to rally all those troops together. And that's where like the foundation of, we're going to create that. We're going to create those situations, and we're going to create that opportunity to be very intentional, to be to take this and make it what we want it to be for this kid, for that specific purpose.
And we use the language of a lot of our players have lagging social skills. It's not that they necessarily have any sort of deficiency, they're just behind. And in order to acquire social skills, like any skill, you have to have experience, you have to have practice, and you have to be rewarded. You have to feel something positive to make you want to keep doing it. So we can very easily, within this game, provide those social rewards. This kid took a risk. He took a risk and put himself out there, and that was immensely rewarded within the game, but also his fellow players, because they're on the same team, also gave him a thumbs up, or they support what the risks this kid is taking, which to him are huge. So once we get an idea of the kinds of things that a player is working on, we talk to the parents, we have release of information forms, we talk to the therapists, if they have a therapist in private practice as well. We will talk to them and figure out what the kinds of things they're working on, and then we'll plan in-game situations specifically targeted towards their real-world areas of growth. An example is one boy, we spoke to his parents, and his teachers had told us that his body language was interfering with his ability to make friends. He would sit at the gaming table with his knees pulled up. And
Okay, don't just actually do it.
I can't. I'm not,
Adam, do it.
Every time I tried
There you
to
go.
do this at
I
Emerald
believe.
City, and I couldn't do it. Think this.
There you go. Nice.
I'm gonna stick your wrist right there for
You should- The last time you tried to do that, the table almost fell.
Yeah. This was much more successful.
Yeah, practice, right.
So this boy came to our group, and he didn't know that his body language was interfering with his ability to make friends. And at a more traditional social skills group, that would have been direct instruction, here's how body language affects other people.
Right. Hey, John, your body language really affects the way that you make friends. It's not very effective, is it? No one responds well to that kind of direct.
Right, and we get a lot of people who don't like going to therapy. By the time they come to our groups, they're tired of being in therapy. They don't want to sit down and have somebody tell them that they have problems. They want to have a good time. And so in our game, we let them play Dungeons and Dragons. And in this particular case, this player, when we gave him the option to choose his character, first of all, he chose a dwarf barbarian, which right there is an indication that this is a player who wants to work on this. He already knows somehow that he's projecting his latent desire onto this character. The character that had the original backstory for this dwarf barbarian, but he was a somber soldier who felt guilty for letting his prince die or something. He abandoned that entirely and made his character this bumbling, stupid dwarf who got in all kinds of trouble. And as a game master, I set up the situation where they had to infiltrate a fancy dinner party to find out some intrigue around the political situation in this town. And so in order to infiltrate this dinner party, they had to have their characters that they're role-playing pretend to be royalty. So there's 3 layers of role-playing going on, where this is a socially challenged teenager pretending to be a dwarf barbarian who's pretending to be a king. So at the game table, I had everybody sit at the table like their characters were sitting. And so this boy who was sitting just like Adam was, sits with his elbows out, his legs really wide, and he starts banging on the table. And because all the NPCs, the non-player characters, are played by me, a drama therapist, I can choose their responses as well as I want to. And so because his character that he was pretending to be a king, all these sycophantic people who were there at the table noticed everything that he did, and they wanted to be like him because they thought he was the king that they needed to act like. So these other people at the table were like, oh. And in this moment, this is a boy who got to see how his body language affected other people. He knew that people noticed how he sat at the table. He got a chance to experiment by making his body larger and taking up space, and was socially rewarded for that. Those moments are, you can see him be seen, like Johnny was saying, are just magical.
Yeah. You can tell that we are really excited about this whole topic. It's just hearing my colleagues talk, I start getting that kind of excitement. And I know that, well, I assume all of you, most if not all of you, have had some sort of experience like this, where it's like, that was amazing. Like, I could talk about this all day long, this experience. And being able to facilitate those moments is really the kind of work that we have been putting together. And it's tying together all of the work that's being done in drama therapy and play therapy, and just what is the natural human interaction with other humans in a healthy way, and doing what most of you already know is that this happens in games. And if you do it with intentionality, which I think is kind of the word of the day, then that's really where the growth starts coming out of.
You know, I think the biggest thing, and if there's anything that you guys get an opportunity to maybe take away from this panel, it's, I hope, what you were kind of walking in for, which is the idea that these games are good for you. They can be good for you, and not only that, but you can use them to grow as an individual. You can use them to be to work towards being better in all sorts of ways. It's something that we work on throughout our lives, just in general. We're constantly trying to create improvements in our own lives or create improvements for ourselves. And we get told all the time that these games aren't any good, that we are putting ourselves down, that we are not getting anything out of this. But doesn't need to be the case. Like, these games can be so good for you.
It's exactly the opposite most of the time. Think back to, like I said, all the stories that you could tell, right? Each one of those stories is indicative of a situation in which something amazing happened, something awesome happened, that you want to retell, that you want to relive. Those are all positive experiences. Those are all situations in which everyone that was part of that experience learned something, or practiced something, or got to experience something again and again. It's the same thing as what they're doing up here. It just happens naturally and in a less guided way. But it's all good. It's all positive.
So in college, I played D&D. So I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for 20 years now, 20 plus years. And in college, I played a game of D&D that lasted 4 years. I played the same character. I played him nearly every week for that entire length of time. He was a bard. His name was Feralis. And in that time, he purchased a bar that was his own bar called Feralis's Court. He managed to befriend a young succubus. I was in college. She just worked at the bar, guys. She just served drinks. That's it. And he also managed to build up this ridiculous repertoire of random assorted objects that I picked up from various games. And when I look back on those experiences, when I think about the types of things that my character was doing throughout all of that time, there's an incredible fondness that I have for everything that I was exploring, everything that I was doing in that. And not only was I taking the difficulties that I was having in college, trying to figure out where I wanted to go with my career, or trying to navigate relationships, and I was taking all of those things and putting them into my character, but I was also getting this opportunity to create this in-depth set of experiences that I had, that I still remember, the times of that I still recall with my friends and get a chance to go back and have conversations about. Those experiences are real. Those experiences that made us closer as friends and that brought us together. And they're just as important as going and playing frisbee in the park at night in college. All of those experiences can travel with you much in the same way.
All right, so the rest of this time I think is going to be open to questions. If you guys have any questions, there's a mic at the front here. You're welcome to fight your way to the front. I'm unimpressed so far.
I also want to throw out that we work with a lot of people who would find it very challenging to stand up in front of this large group of people and ask a question. So we wanted to provide you an alternative.
So if you would like, you can visit ask.whws.us. That'll direct you. That'll take you directly to a Facebook post that we'll be monitoring as long as we have service. I'm not sure about that. We may be monitoring. Okay, great. So maybe, we'll take a look at that and answer some of those questions. You can also tweet us, Wheelhouse WS.
Wheelhouse WS.
And we're also monitoring that as well. So.
And we'll be looking at this beyond just right now.
Yes.
So if you have a question that you didn't get answered or if service didn't work, we would love to answer your questions.
Every question that gets posted will get answered at some point, we promise. And there's nothing you can do with it. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I wondered.
Oh, is it?
It should be up. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Then just
There we go.
I wondered if you had specific thoughts about the therapeutic applications of LARP style games as opposed to sit down.
Tips. Like I said earlier, my background is in drama therapy, and that's pretty much what you're talking about is pretty much drama therapy. There's so much to be said about taking what we do and embodying it. There's so much of our memories and so much of our experience is stored in our bodies, and so much experience can be reenacted and taken apart and put back together by embodying it. And I think there's a whole lot of good stuff you can do with LARPing. There was definitely times because my background is in drama therapy, that I would have my players get up and act things out or stand like their character, those kinds of things. I had one player was talking to a goblin with the spell of tongues. So he was speaking in Goblin, and then I had the spell run out, and then he had to mime the rest of the story he was telling, and that was another opportunity for him to be to embody everything that his character had done, because he was telling these goblins why he was a hero. So then he got to act out the whole story we'd been doing that whole month and a half in regular D&D style. He got to then act it out as his character.
I feel like it's also important on the LARPing side to mention that in some other countries they actually do more LARPing in very intentional, engaged in therapeutic or research-based things that are going on. There's, I think it's Norway. I want to say Norway.
They have public funding.
They have public funding for LARP projects to do things like study what would happen if there was a huge disaster that cut off electricity and water, and they'll use LARPing as a way to help sort of simulate that experience. There's also a woman who wrote a book, her name's Sarah Lynn Bowman, and she wrote a book that's The Functions of Role-Playing Games, How Participants Create Communities, Solve Problems, and Explore Identity. And in it she talks about, her field is definitely more on the LARPing side. She talks much more about how those things function really directly in relationship to personal identification and therapy. It's a great read. It's influenced some of our work too.
Thank you.
Try.
Hi. I have a brother who's ADHD, and he's always asking, hey, can we play Pathfinder? Can we play D&D? And I'm like, yeah, sure, buddy. But to me, the challenge I'm having, especially in just trying to set up a situation like that, is the fact that he's ADHD, so he'll be playing Mindcraft, and while he's having to sleep overnight because he's in survival mode, he's also playing a handheld game and has a movie on the TV, and this kid's watching, paying attention to all three of it, right? So, as DMs for kids like this, what kind of things would you do to kind of help him focus, help him kind of stay in character? I think that's my most difficult part in trying to come up with something that would be good for him, is just how to keep him focused and in the game.
So can I ask kind of around what age? Because
He just turned 14.
Okay. We actually have a kid in one of our groups who has some similar difficulties. He really has a lot of trouble focusing. A little more the inattentive and less the hyperactive type of ADHD. So we give him these that actually work great for. Nice catch. These work great as like little squeeze balls to help kind of keep your attention focused and things like that. We keep a lot of dice at the table, and although it's not always the best thing, they will play with dice to no end, and that's a really engaging piece. But the biggest pieces are letting them have a pretty good amount of description and a pretty good amount of play with the game that they can use, like a good amount of involvement that they can use to be involved. So there's two pieces of it. One, which is learning to take turns and learning to let other people do it. But if you're looking to how do you create the engagement piece, that piece is much more helped along by letting them have the involvement, letting them come up with like, what does their character look like, and what kind of clothes is he wearing, and what does their sword look like, and those kinds of things. Even though they might describe all of the parts of their sword and change their mind 100 times, those are all great ways that they can conceptualize and make themselves more involved with the game.
Keep them in the game. Yeah.
Exactly.
Build on that real quick. We also, something we've done in our games for kids who have some of the challenges is give some sort of magical device or magical ability that they have innately. We'll just say that they got some sort of magic touch that lets them see hidden messages or talk to ghosts that nobody else can see, and it makes them have to stay engaged and participate. One of our players has a lens that I've got straight from They Live, if anybody's seen the movie They Live, that lets them see whether or not somebody is really a shape-shifting monster from beyond time and space. And that means that every time we encounter an NPC, the other players go, it only works for him, they tell him to look through the lens to make sure it's not a shape-shifting monster from beyond time and space.
And I'd just like to add finally, he's your brother, you know him really well, I'm assuming. One thing with some of the younger kids that I work with, it's the new normal to be engaged in multiple things, and that's just kind of their culture. Their friends do it, they do it. I'm texting and talking to you at the same time. And what I realized is that he was still listening 100%. So I told him, when it's just us, you can do as many things as you want, just as long as I still know that you're paying attention. When you're with other people, you have to pay, and by giving him permission to do that, he actually started putting other things away. And just because I acknowledged that he was having a different experience than me, and I gave him permission to do it. And that just kind of, brought us into the same place.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Adam, no, that's yours. Adam, can you go a little bit more into why some situations might not be a good idea to have dice piled on the table?
So early on when I was doing kind of playing role-playing games with these particular populations of kids, there was sort of a difficult to deal with situation. So as you guys probably know, there's sort of a norm in Dungeons and Dragons that you don't touch other people's dice. So it comes from a little bit of the superstition that if someone else touches my dice, that they're going to take away the luck or something along those lines. And some people are pretty adamant about it.
Superstition?
Actual believing. And so I had, I often played with a big mix of people, and one particular occasion I had one player who was playing a wizard who was very, very experienced. He played for years and years. He was playing a character that was totally broken. It was way OP. He'd like gone through and figured out every number, every single thing that he needed to do to make this character super powerful.
Well,
and then,
he was a wizard.
He was actually, he was like 2 levels of sorcerer, and if I want to actually break it down, I think he had a couple levels of like a spell blade or something like that in there. Ridiculous. He was very powerful. And then I had another player who was brand new, who'd never played the game before, had never seen multi-sided dice beyond 6-sided dice. He was just being introduced. On the first day of groups, I'm sitting down with a pile of dice in front of me and a big table where we're all sitting down, and I'm explaining how dice are an important part of this game. And as soon as the kid who's brand new to the group was playing Thief, by the way, as soon as my Thief, not
foreshadowing.
yeah. As soon as he hears that dice are an important part of the game, he looks over and he sees my experienced wizard player, who is sitting there with a huge bag of his own dice. And he gets up, runs around the table, grabs the wizard player's dice, and runs all the way back to his seat. Now, my wizard, so as a reminder, these kids don't necessarily have a lot of great skills to handle like frustration and patience. So, my wizard character gets up out of his seat, walks over to the kid, and then punches him in the chest. And takes back his bag of dice and walks back to his seat. So this all happened in a matter of maybe 5 seconds or something. So I'm sitting there trying to facilitate the group. Obviously, physical violence is not an acceptable way to ask for your dice back.
Just reiterate that. Physical violence.
But I had to sit there and figure out how do I explain both that that's not an okay way to handle that, but also explain the norm that it's not okay to necessarily go and touch people's dice in this particular game. So I totally forgot what your original question was.
That was it. So that's why you should be careful about piles of dice on the
So there are times where like making sure that you explicitly state the norms, where you kind of make sure you outline some of those things, can be a really important part of setting up the game. Right. And piles of dice are really dangerous.
I think another way to look at it is, for both of the characters, for both of the players, they weren't doing anything wrong as far as they knew.
Yeah, and also they both walked away from the end of that game at least being collaborative. I don't know whether or not they went and like hung out outside of our group in that particular case. Yeah, but they were collaborative in the game. They didn't it didn't turn into a huge fight. They learned how to work together, and they learned that there are rules that they kind of need to have to follow as a part of all of them.
Okay, so we've got a Twitter question, and then we'll get to you. I'm sorry. All right, so someone on Twitter says, how would you suggest adapting the mechanics in D&D for 5 to 10-year-olds? Make this a short answer question.
The mechanics of D&D specifically. We are currently working on like a way to take that and boil it down a little bit more. We've worked on some simpler systems. My suggestion whenever I'm dealing with younger kids is that I take a pre-made character and I predetermine everything that they have for their character. And then I let them know exactly every place that they need to look or everything that they need to add for whatever thing that they particularly want to do. The rules themselves are really just a framework for making this work. So if they want to pick up a chair and throw it, I don't necessarily need to make them do an improvised weapon check. I don't need to make them roll without their proficiency bonus. And for those of you familiar with fifth ed, I can just sort of let them make an attack. They're young enough that they're
house rule.
Exactly. So they're young enough that they can pick up those parts, and you can let them run with that and be a part of the game without having to necessarily have every rule in front of them and memorize every rule. You can facilitate. You can do that part for them.
So this is something that we've actually been talking about for a while, breaking this down. So the short answer is you just get a degree in psychology and have 20 years of D&D experience, and you're halfway there.
To whoever that Twitter user was, you got one of these things. You want to come up after the show's
All right.
over.
Actually, this time?
Yeah.
For real this time.
I'm just curious.
So
I'm curious as to how this project got started.
I don't know how you started.
Happenstance.
Adam and I were working as a part of another company who was doing some of this work, and we saw that opportunity and thought that we wanted to do a lot more with it. We actually started by doing, it just happened to be the case that the traffic, we were running groups on the east side, we were running groups in Bellevue for those familiar with the area. The traffic in like the afternoon was terrible, and so we would just get there way, way early to help avoid having to sit in traffic for a long time. And so Adam and I would sit there for 2 hours or 3 hours before our groups, and we would sit there and plan. And in doing that, we started to discover that we could do more with this. We could figure out ways, we were figuring out scenarios and going, this kid really would benefit from his character, overcoming that challenge. Or like your necromancer character, a character that really needed to build on friendships and learn how to cooperate and create those situations where they could both express their fears about building friendships and also build on cooperating and getting along with the friends that they have. I think that's probably the place where we really started digging into being intentional with it and being able to apply the games that way.
How did you start, Johnny?
Oh, so what's true with most of us is, and some people may be wondering, how can I get to do that? It just was a lot of different experiences that ended up kind of coalescing in the right spot at, with populations that we really enjoy working with. So I don't know.
So you stumble in.
Write us, and we can help you out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh. Nice.
Yeah.
Until we run out, I don't know.
We had someone who didn't get one very first
Did we?
question.
No,
No,
I
I got it.
Oh, you didn't get one? Oh,
We're good.
thank you. Okay, good. Thank you.
There. So I actually work with at-risk teenage girls, and we actually do like summer creation therapy.
Thank you for what
Yeah,
you do.
absolutely.
I also get a week off, which is kind of nice. So a lot of the girls I work with have a lot of past trauma, and there is research in sort of using like play therapy in like a sandbox with younger kids to sort of talk about trauma. Do you guys have any like thoughts or ideas on how you could possibly use like D&D to sort of work through trauma with teenagers as opposed to like young kids?
Yeah, that's such a big question. Just because trauma is such a big like.
You hear us all hesitating because trauma can be really dangerous
It's a really hard
to
one.
get back into it. That being said, yes.
So the biggest things and maybe the biggest advantage to a tool like D&D as far as working on trauma is the fact that it gives you the opportunity to let them approach however safe they feel. So I would never ever push a player into facing a trauma that they had experienced within the game. But I might give them the opportunity to explore some of those things within the game. And I would start off at a long distance. So as an example, if I had a player who had experienced like a physical trauma, like being physically assaulted, I might not necessarily have that. I wouldn't have that experience like happen again in the game and have them restory it. But I might give them the opportunity to see an NPC who's being attacked or something like that, and now they have the opportunity to choose to intervene. And on another occasion, I might give them the opportunity to then see a person who looks like the person who had physically assaulted them, but with no actual assaulting. So I would like slowly scaffold down and give them more and more opportunities to choose at their own risk whether or not they want to engage in that way.
And to throw in another thing from drama therapy, we have this term called aesthetic distance. And it's the idea that sometimes you're identifying with your character and sometimes your character is very distant from you. And I would say that there's a lot to be said in a situation like that to talk about the character and not say you're in this situation where this is happening to you, but your character is in some sort of situation. And then the character, or the player, is enrolled in the ability to give advice to their character, to which I don't want to tell you what to do because I don't know who you're working with, but there are opportunities to give people an opportunity to claim their wisdom. And I think that's an opportunity there. You don't want to ever put somebody in the position where they need to regret that they didn't know that at the time, and that's really the risk that you're playing when you're playing with trauma like that. I would say, I don't know, I'm gonna let I don't know, that's
In the
it's really
end,
messy.
I think that we're come up afterwards. We would love to talk with you more about
Yeah,
this.
actually, absolutely.
and I think
trauma
that-
is really interesting.
The short answer is like basically what's happened here is we've taken theories that we've learned about, right, that we've talked with, and maybe even training that we've had, and applied it. Figured out how can we apply that within the structure of D&D or Mindcraft. And so I'm sure you got training, and I'm sure that you have somewhat anyway. And so you probably have heard of theories, or you have ideas about what works and what doesn't work. And this is another tool in which you can kind of apply those in a different way. So kind of just tuck them inside the game, and that turns out that's extremely effective sometimes in kind of that single separation, as Adam was saying. I wish his name was Adam because then I could just say it.
I'm honorary Adam. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'd
but
love-
yes,
we'd
talk
love
with
to
us
chat.
afterwards
Yeah.
for sure. Thank you very much.
Nice.
All right. What's up?
Wanted to know with the social skills that you work on in both the groups and in Minecraft. I guess this is maybe more specifically tailored toward the Minecraft type intervention. How do you help the individual kind of generalize those skills outside of that setting?
That is the $6,400 question.
He's just kidding. We don't have $6,400.
Yeah.
We have like 20 of these though.
It's a really good question. That's because this is the big challenge. When you have mastered a skill in the therapeutic or the gaming situation, how can you then apply it? What I have found personally that works is to backload it first. What is it that they are? So I'm not saying in the game, hey everyone, let's build this thing, and then afterwards, look, we built this thing, now let's go into the real world and build it. I start in the real world and I say, we're having trouble building this thing, let's practice in Minecraft where we're good at it. We've got our skills. And so then they're already thinking about the outside thing while they're building it in this realm that they have the skills. So I kind of couch it ahead of time, really front load it ahead of time. We are going to go somewhere where we're all really good at it. we know the commands and we know how to play around with creative mode, and we're going to build this and then see what happens. And then afterwards I can debrief on this is what happened, this is what we got. Does that help?
Yeah.
Kind of?
And then also for the...
Yeah.
So I'll add that, like, in an ideal world, we're working alongside of, our groups are not meant to be a replacement for therapy. And we're working alongside of therapists who can then use the information that they're getting from connecting with us or connecting with their client, who is also our client, and then being able to take that and apply it outside of the groups. Like, I would love to see more therapists who are specializing in geeks and gamers who have knowledge about D&D, so that when I have our shy kid who then has that experience as Gragnol, and he comes into therapy and he talks about, like, oh, that was so much fun, I had a really good time, then the therapist can go, yeah, like, you did have a really great time and you were so successful, and you noticed these things. You noticed that when you acted this way, it was really successful in this situation. Let's see if we can figure out how to, like, take that and then apply it further into other stuff. We do see kids taking what they're learning in our groups and applying them outward, but we could definitely use that extra boost.
One of our favorite questions to ask is, what advice would you give your character, and what advice would your character give you? And there's a lot of really interesting things can happen.
Oh man.
So yeah, that covers it.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go.
Lightning round.
So it's lightning round time. So ask your question and we'll speed answer. Go.
My question is really similar to the last two, so I'm going to ask the same question I was going to ask originally and then change it at the end. So,
Trick question.
So like the purpose of teaching and education usually is kind of what people were saying, right? Fostering independence and transference from one context to another context. And like there's two kind of obvious not surface, but like easy to understand things you guys are talking about. The first is kind of the imaginative practice, which Adam on the left was talking about.
Wait, who's
That's not our
Stage center. So there's the imaginative practice part, and then the other part is the kind of real part where you're in a low stakes social situation with other people and you're like building your confidence. So I was gonna ask, besides like a really didactic one where you're just saying like, hey, now that you've done this, you can transfer it this way, but you kind of just answered that. So my alternate question is, when somebody fails, when a teenager, kid or whatever, fails in their attempt to transfer something, and they probably have low confidence, right? When that confidence is degraded and hurt, what strategies and coping strategies do you think are effective in helping them kind of recover from those losses and rebuild?
I have sentences to add this in the
Perfect.
It's a really easy question.
Yeah. For me, the experience doesn't create the like, now let's go replicate this. It creates a shared language. So let's blow up the castle. And then we've already established that it's difficult to blow up the castle, but we're going to try to blow up the castle. if that makes sense.
We try to make failure in the game be interesting and a learning opportunity such that that skill can be translated to the real world. So when you try something in the game, if you roll low, we don't punish you. I had a player in my last game fail a roll, save against fear. And instead of giving this player a penalty, I had the character jump on the back of another character, and then they had to talk her down so she wouldn't like knock the torch out of her hand or something. It was an opportunity to explore. Every time we fail, we're actually learning something. We have an opportunity to do something cool in the game so that the tolerance for failure increases.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the biggest piece is that like failure in the game we know doesn't equate to like ultimate failure. And so building up that tolerance is a huge part of just playing the game in general. So as they're going through, once they do start taking those skills and applying them to the real world, they are building up that tolerance for understanding that a failure doesn't really mean failing.
Right.
And I can go on past that. I do have the strength to go on past that because I've done that in the game as my character.
So on a basic level, one of the easiest things to do to change if you're worried about that in any game is failure isn't, rolling low isn't failure. It's merely the pre-selection of a different opportunity. Right? Which is, I mean, and that's what they turn it into, right? So, excellent. There you go.
Thank you.
I'm not going to catch.
Okay, we have another Twitter question. So this is a fast Twitter question, right?
Okay, fast.
How do you deal with uncooperative players? For example, those who feel that they won't benefit from therapy.
You have to enter 124 characters. Go.
That just blew too. No.
Okay, Adams.
If there are characters, so the biggest thing is we're playing a game. If there are people who are coming to the game and they want to be a part of the game is a cooperative game. That's part of the game. We don't allow player versus player combat in our games, and for a lot of reasons, and we explain those reasons very explicitly. We say, you're not going to have a good time, somebody's character is going to die, it might be yours, and once that happens, we're going to spend most of the game of being really, really bored while we're doing it. So we just don't allow player versus player combat in our game, and if they're being uncooperative, we help provide motivations to keep them more cooperative within that game. So like we let them make choices for their character for why they should cooperate, and reframe it in a way where they get to add that to their character rather than us forcing it upon their character. That's a
Great short. That was wonderful. Do you have anything to add real fast?
No, that's great.
Wonderful. Perfect. Your question.
So, somewhat similar. I just graduated with my master's in counseling psychology.
Nice.
And I really want to incorporate this work into my practice. So, one thing I'm curious about is what's your experience been with like parents or administrators or insurance companies who have these prejudices against game?
That's been a continual struggle to figure out how to explain role-playing games to people who don't play role-playing games. And there's a lot of really great resources available in the drama therapy world, because that's a similar thing about what is drama therapy. It's the intentional and systematic use of drama games and activities. That doesn't mean anything. So ours is the intentional and systematic use of role-playing games. We're really struggling with that.
Come to us afterwards, and we can actually try and answer.
But honestly, the thing that I would say is give people the opportunity to play it.
Yeah.
Because that's an experience that you can't really encapsulate. I challenge anybody to try to explain what a role-playing game is in 11-second elevator speech. It's nearly impossible. So, but I really encourage you to try, and please tweet or email us or something, because I would totally love to have that. Insurance companies especially.
All right. Okay. Next question. We'll see you afterwards for sure.
So I really like your guys' approach, and I see adolescents, and I'd love to learn more about how to utilize it. I know nothing about gaming, although I like gaming. I like the idea of gaming. How do I bring it into my office and consciousness? What's the easiest, best road to do that?
So I'm going to grab this one because these guys are gamers that came into therapy. I'm a therapist that came into gaming. And a lot of it is play the game. I got
What would
into
you suggest? What games would you suggest?
Minecraft. Well, wait. How old are you?
5 to
Minecraft. And I got into Minecraft because all of the guys that I was working with, and I say guys because they're all guys, were playing Minecraft. They were talking about it, so I'm like, this sounds cool, and I started playing it. Next, I'm going to pick up Pokemon because right now all of the people that I'm talking to are playing Alpha Ruby and I don't remember the other one. But yeah, so I'm going to pick it up and start playing it and trying to figure it out and see if I can get addicted to
Older
it.
adolescents?
This is probably around 12, give or take.
So 17, 16?
League of Legends.
League of Legends.
Or Dota 2.
Dota 2, yeah.
And so we play that together?
Yeah.
I would say that like one of the biggest things is if they're interested in it and you want to use it in an intentional way, then you have to grab onto it, see what they're interested in, ask them about the games that they're interested in. Teenagers will love to tell you all of the games that they're interested in.
Right. I can't imagine being a webmaster or doing the kinds of manipulations that you guys are talking about.
Oh yeah, a lot of it really, like especially at the first parts of it is that you're giving, like kind of like Johnny said, you're giving the shared language. So if you can get some of those terms, if you can get some of that language, have them teach you the game.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get started. I have a therapist in my office who's learning League of Legends specifically because she's got a client who's playing League of Legends. And she doesn't know anything about the game, but she's learning that there are different classes in the game, and she's using that as a way to help create a parallel to the idea of like, how do you handle trauma? Because sometimes you need to be aggressive, and sometimes you need to be like your AD carry and move through the game, through the trauma that way by like being aggressive to the things around you. And sometimes you have to be more defensive, and you have to be the support character for yourself and do the things to hold back. Yeah. Or talk about the people in your life that play those roles. So if you can get them talking about the game, then you can draw the parallels for them. So if they can teach you, that's the best place. That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Get them
These
to
are
teach you.
really good questions, and you guys are terrible at answering them.
Send us an email though.
Thank you so much.
Keep talking.
We'll do it really quick.
All right, yeah, what's up?
Okay, so I noticed when you guys were talking, you're basically trying to use the lead effect for positive interactions. But how do you guys deal with the lead effect of interpersonal conflict between the different characters? You know, if you have your thief and your barbarian who don't get along.
We have to answer this in a short one.
In one sentence, I created an in-game situation where they needed to mediate the conflict between a monster with two heads that I played with my hands like puppets.
Yes, it's one sentence. To add on to the story, each head just had similar conflict, like they were conflicting in much the same way. So in order to move forward with the story, they had to help mediate what was going on with the two heads, which of course means that they are mediating their own conflict that they are going through in order to do that.
The two conflicts, the two-headed Etten that they named the two heads George and Maverick. And the two heads had the mirroring personalities that the two conflicting players had. So one was a character who liked to plan everything out before it happened, and the other one liked to just run in head first and stab. And which some of you might be that this way too. But they had to, but before this Etten would come help them sack the castle, they had to. The hot-headed improviser had to tell the head that sometimes he has to slow down and listen to the other guy because he was giving this head of the Etten advice because he wanted something out of him, but it still gave him the opportunity to use the language and know the correct answer.
So that's the beauty of D&D and Minecraft, is that this is exactly why it works so perfectly, is that some of the best situations are when you have characters that are interacting, because that's more and more practice, right?
We're over 1 minute, but I want to hear your question. I know.
Yes.
Oh my God, what's my question?
What things like PvP do you will avoid when it comes to games?
All of it.
What other things?
So because we're out of time, the really quick question is, everything that is done that might interact the two characters in what could be a negative way, I preface ahead of time and really set up the strong ground rules ahead of time. Like, this is why we're doing it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.